there are two concepts that I like to talk about. One of them is rule of law, and one of them is rule by law. And they're very different concepts. In fact, Aristotle and Plato argued about these two things. One of them believed in rule of law. Rule of law means that all people are equal under the eyes of the law. All people are treated equally under the eyes of the law. No one is above the law. In fact, rule of law is the great equalizer. Rule of law means a rich man and a poor man will both pay the same fine for a speeding ticket. Rule of law means that no one can escape judgment, lawful judgment for crimes simply because of their position, simply because of their party, simply because of their affiliation, or because of their economic status. Rule by law is a very different concept. Rule by law means that you have a set of rules designed to govern a body of people, but there is a class of people who are above that law, and the laws are designed to rule you. But there are a class of people, political elites, who are above that law, and they do not suffer judgment based upon their crimes or based upon infractions of that law. In the United States, we are supposed to have rule of law. That's one of the founding principles of our nation, that all men are created equal, and they're treated equally in the eyes of the law. In the state of California, we have a class of political elites who tell you what to do and then you do it. And they are not subject to the same laws that you're subject to. One of them is Governor Brown. He used state employees and state money to prospect for oil on his own ranch so that he could maybe frack. Now, here's a guy that went to the Paris Climate Summit, and he said to the people of France about the people of California, he was talking about you. And he was telling this to a large group of foreign nationals, French people and people from other countries. He said, I believe in the coercive power of the central state. And believe me, California will continue to innovate, continue to regulate, and continue to tax. He was making that statement about you. He was talking about your lives and your money, while he is not subject to the same regulations. There was a big political scandal a while back. Senator Wright, Senator Calderon, Senator De Leon, who is now the Senate pro tem, by the way, were under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for fraud. They do not live in the districts they represent. And Senator De Leon was investigated for some money changing hands associated with that. And he escaped punishment, by the way. He also does not live in his district. In fact, he said that the California Senate was very vulnerable to that domicile issue. Well, that's a good way of putting that. In other words, if you're committing a felony by not living in the district you run in and you're elected in, that doesn't make you a felon. It makes you vulnerable to the domicile issue. So, do we live in a nation of laws? Do we live in a state of law where the law applies equally to everyone, or do we live in a state where political elites tell you what to do and you're expected to do it? That's why we're here today, isn't it? Because we have not the representation to lawfully go to Sacramento and challenge these things and do something about them. In fact, we have no representation at all. In fact, the rule of law is breaking down in California. I met my first slave the other day. I'd never met a slave before. I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to be contrite or funny now. I was out on an operation, and we ran into a guy, and he said that he was brought here from another state along with his wife and lots of other people, and they were dropped off in marijuana gardens, and their boss brings them food every couple of weeks. And he hopes he comes back pretty soon because they're out of food, and they've been out of food for a couple of days. And they have no money, and they have no car. He had no means to escape, and believe me, these are remote areas. If that guy and his wife, and he was in his 50s, I'm guessing, tried to walk out of there, they wouldn't have made it. That's what we have in California. And the Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom, wants to make all that legal so that there'll be even more money and more ways of doing those things for someone, but not for you, for other people, to enjoy the benefits of that, quote, business. And Gavin Newsom thinks that business will revolutionize California. By the way, I'm a felon now in Gavin Newsom's eyes and Kevin De Leon's eyes, because I want to ask you another question. What is your line in the sand? What will you sit still for? What will you acquiesce to? What will you roll over for? Where do you say enough? Where do you say, I will not submit? Amen, brother. George Washington said that the difference between the American Christian and pretty much anyone else on earth is this: the American Christian would rather die on his feet than live on his knees. That's a strong statement. That is a strong statement. And they meant it then, because they purchased our liberty with their lives, their treasure, and their sacred honor. And they gave us our founding document. Now, is our founding document our Constitution? No. That's our second try. Declaration of Independence is our founding document. Our Articles of Confederation codified those principles, and then the people, using their primary jurisdiction, all power is inherent in the people, Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution, all power is inherent in the people, all power. Not some power, not power politicians want us to have, not power we can kind of get away with. All power is inherent in the people. Government was instituted to serve the people, and it is their right to alter or reform government anytime the public good demands. So in the Articles of Confederation, the founders sat down and they drew up what they thought was a pretty good deal. But it was apparent that it wasn't working as well as they thought it would. So then in Philadelphia, they came there initially to talk about other things. Well, the first thing they went to talk about was, let's get rid of those Articles of Confederation and start over again. Well, they were all felons then, because one of the articles expressly says you won't change these articles without express permission from your state. But all power is inherent in the people. And whenever government fails to serve the people, and that's right here, it is their duty and their responsibility to abolish that form of government and institute a new form more suitable to their needs. And so literally they invented Constitution. That's what we're doing here today, folks. And I've got to tell you, it hasn't been easy. This has been a years-long, torturous process. But when I look here, you guys make me nervous. This is the first time I've ever given one of these talks where I was a little bit nervous. Because I look here and I see a room filled with people, and you mean it. And I mean it. And we have to pledge to each other our lives, our treasure, and our sacred honor, or we will lose. It will take nothing less than that. The time for talk, the time for play is over. We're finished with that. We have been calling and writing letters to the people in Sacramento, including the people who claim to represent us, for months and months and months and months. And do you know what their response is? The silence is deafening. Even our own representatives will not return a phone call. Here's representation in California. I have a letter from my assembly person, and he says, I have the pleasure of representing 500,000 people. He has that pleasure. One of my supervisors called him 3 weeks ago because we need him to get in a car and drive around for 25 minutes with us to show him how rampant the illegal cartels are in our county. Well, yeah, that would be good, but he never returned the phone call because he has lots of counties to represent. There are bigger fires in other counties. Our county's little. We're poor. We really, in the political scheme of things, mean nothing. If every one of our people voted exactly the way we needed them to every time, it would be like spitting in a bucket. So he won't return the phone call. Our senator, Senate District 1, 11 counties. 11 counties. We never even see him. We've probably seen him twice in 8 years. Ted Who is his name. But because of you, we actually had a Senate candidate, Steve Baird, who got 14% of the vote with no money. I mean, that's amazing. But now here's what happens in California. In 1960, a guy ran for assembly, and he said that he spent the most money that anyone's ever spent on a political campaign in California in order to win his seat, $15,000. No one had ever spent $15,000 on a political campaign for assembly before in California. That same gentleman said in 1992 that we lost California to the unions. California is no longer in the control of the people. It's in control of the state employees unions, CalPERS, CalSTRS, and so on. Now, once again, those things aren't good or bad. They're just conditions that we have to recognize and work with. And that's what we're doing here today. So we have completed 21 declarations. Lassen County, the state prison employees voted against Jefferson, but we still have a declaration there because their Board of Supervisors signed a declaration either to join the state of Jefferson or to attack Reynolds versus Sims, which is where we're going now. We have 21 declarations. No legislator will put in a bill. None. Not one. No one will even talk to us about it. They are scared of you, because they're afraid that you may be in charge of the government that's supposed to serve you. They are scared to death of you because the status quo is an apple cart filled with money, and you are about to knock that cart over. So our next step is a court challenge of the three cases that got us where we are today. Gray versus Sanders, Baker versus Carr, Reynolds versus Sims. Those cases started out, and I'm going to really try to be brief because people are shaking their heads at me already. Those cases started out, the federal court gave themselves the power to change the Constitution of the United States without the benefit of the amendment process and without your benefit and without the benefit of the legislature. And that was in Baker versus Carr when they said the federal court has the power to intervene in state elections. This is a contract, everybody. A contract just like a contract to buy a car. Can you imagine in your wildest dreams that the authors of the contract would create an entity that had the power to change its own rules without you having any say in it? That's not how this works. But most lawyers, and I've been told this by our federal court attorney and our Supreme Court attorney, most attorneys have never read this. Because they really, and I hate the word believe. Believe is kind of like a magic thing to me. This isn't belief, this is evidence, this is empirical, this is proof with dried blood all over it. And most attorneys have never read it. They get less than 8 hours of training in this in law school. But they do believe in case law. Case law runs everything. Common law is not what most people think. Common law had a different definition in William Blackstone's time when he said that the inalienable rights are absolute. They are not. They issue from court case law. Common law in those days meant law that made sense and law that was empirical and typical for the area and the day and the time and the customs. That's what common law used to mean in 1648. Now common law has a definition in Black's Law. It means law that issues from the court. Well, goodness, the way I read this document, and I've read this a few times, I think you can probably tell, law issues from the legislature. Law does not issue from the legislature in California. Kevin De Leon told his buddies before Gun-Mageddon, he said, pass any law you want, don't worry about the Constitution, we'll let the court sort it out. That means law issues from the court. The founders intended for the court to be the smallest branch of government because the legislature was supposed to oversee that branch. We have over 4,000 judges in California and 120 state representatives. How are 100 of these guys going to pay attention to 4,000 judges? Well, the answer is evident. They won't, and they don't. We aim to change that with Jefferson. We want to form a government with property rights and individual rights that are absolute rights, where eminent domain of property rights does not exist except in national emergency, time of war, and only then with a jury. We want to form a government where the state cannot hold counties hostage with their own money, We want to form a state where the federal government cannot hold the state hostage with its own money. We want to form a state where legislators are responsible under pain of penalty of law for malfeasance and corruption. And we can do that. Now, if Baker versus Carr, Gray versus Sanders, and Gray versus Sanders, by the way, was one man, one vote, and I'm trying to really speed it up because I see Terry frowning at me. And then Reynolds versus Sims was the nail in the box where the court said that all elections in a state will be subject to scrutiny by the federal court. That's what Reynolds was. There are cases after Reynolds that we can use and that we plan to use. One is Brown versus Thompson, where Niobrara County, a very small county in Wyoming, retained a state legislator, and they only have 3,000 people. The population disparity between Cheyenne County and Niobrara County was immense. And so someone sued and said, oh, their vote counts more than ours does. And the court said, no, you can keep your representative because, and here's the quote, it is easier to oppress the people of this state or of any other when a county has no representative than it is when each county has at least one state-level representative. Another case was Saylor versus Tulare Water. That was a California case where the court said that votes cannot represent rocks and trees, but votes can represent community. And communities have diverse needs and diverse interests, diverse geography. A desert county like Mojave County has different needs than a forest county like Siskiyou County. A waterless county has different needs than a county that has bountiful water. And those needs need to be represented by their people. And by the way, in the state of Jefferson, I'm not advocating against one man, one vote. Everyone will still have a vote, everyone. But what I'm saying is you will vote for the representative that represents your county. We do that now. I don't vote for supervisors in Tehama County. I vote for them in Siskiyou County. In Jefferson, every county will have equal representation in the state Senate. In Jefferson, no county will have less than one assembly person, no matter how small they are. That is the federal model of government. That is the model of government that we were given by this Constitution. That's the federal model of government. That's what you wrote into this document. That's what the states authored. That's what they intended. And the court under Earl Warren said, no, that's not true. States don't deserve the same consideration that the federal government deserves. Warren, by the way, was what Eisenhower referred to as the worst damn fool mistake he ever made. Sorry, Lord. But in the case Holder versus Hall, the court said that the Supreme Court is not a Politburo for life to dictate state election processes. Wow, there's a statement for the court to make about itself. And then in Abbott versus Evenwell, which was the Texas case that just came before the court, and it did not prevail. But here's the deal with Abbott, and we've been looking at this case and researching it and tearing it apart. We did not lose anything when Abbott lost that case. We won. That was big for us. And when we were reading that case, we were on a conference call, myself and the attorneys and a couple other guys, for like 5 hours talking about this case. We won big with Abbott because Texas did not err when they constructed their political districts strictly by population. That was not a violation of the Constitution. That's all the Supreme Court found in Abbott, and they were right. And Clarence Thomas went on to say, because states can construct their election districts any way they want to, as long as they're not prejudicial. So I have to find with the majority that Texas did not err. They constructed their districts, and that's what states do, and they have sovereignty to do that. But here's the beauty of it. But what Thomas also went on to say was that this court has been trying for decades to support the principle of one man, one vote, and it has consistently, and when I say one man, one vote, I mean general districts. I'm not talking about the model of government that Jefferson proposes, where we each have a vote, but it's only for people within our own district. When the court constructed its arguments for one man, one vote, it's been trying for decades to support that right. And no such right exists. The court has failed consistently because there is no right that the Supreme Court can manufacture that causes all election districts to be constructed by population. There is no such principle. And Thomas found that, and Alito agreed with him. And I could go on. I've got 15 pages here of just the things that help us out of that one case. And I'm going to stay here, by the way, so once you guys break away, I'm going to stay here and answer questions for those of you who don't know what we're doing or have questions or concerns. So I'll be here answering all of your questions. You're welcome to ask them. So here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create the first Article 4, Section 3 state split since West Virginia broke away from Virginia. We have the people, we have the means, we have the opportunity, and the timing is right. Because I don't know about you, but I'm a little angry and I'm pretty tired. And that's my line in the sand. We need your help. We can't do this alone. No one could. We need phone callers. We need emailers. We need to keep the pressure on Sacramento because our attorneys tell us that court is theater. Really? No one knew that, right? Court is nothing but a drama play constructed by an 8th grade drama teacher, and whoever comes in and does the most screaming and hollering wins. So we need screaming and hollering, folks, on a scale that California hasn't seen in a very, very long time. We need for people to have drawn their line in the sand. Because William Blackstone said, no government can violate God's law. God's law is the highest law there is. There is no law above God's law. All English common laws, all American constitutional laws are based on God's law. It's time. It's your time. It's your time to say enough. It is your time to say, I will not go quietly. I will stand for liberty. I will stand for Constitution. I will not be stopped. I will do whatever it takes to achieve statehood for Jefferson. I'd like to, in closing, just read you. And by the way, we're very close to having a framework for a state constitution. That's part of why we're here. I'm going to ask Steve and Diana to put a suggestion box in the Jefferson website so that ideas for constitutional republic can be placed there by these committees or by you as individuals. No one knows it all. It is only by our collective effort that we will succeed. It's only by our spirit of unity that we will succeed. But I just was kind of fooling around and I wrote a preamble. And this may not be what we end up with, but this is what I kind of imagine our state to be. And by the way, did you know that California had a preamble to its Constitution? Did you know why we have a Constitution in California? We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate it, do establish His Constitution. How we doing, folks? It is time to abolish the political bands which formerly connected us with the people who rule by law in this state. There are times in the history of men when political discourse leads to a separation of two people. We, the people of the state of Jefferson, do not separate out of enmity, for in the case of enmity we hold none toward any man, woman, race, or creed. We separate in the name of representation, the last barrier standing between the people and tyranny. And tyranny, however well-intentioned, is nonetheless repugnant. Our safety, our security concern us not where liberty is at risk. Liberty gives urgent voice to our demand for representation which must reflect our needs, our history, our culture, and our moral imperative. It is these liberties the people of Jefferson hold most dear. It is our natural, inalienable rights which compel us to establish the state of Jefferson. We, the people, direct our representatives now and forever that the intent and meaning of this Constitution shall always be adjudicated to the protection of the lives, liberty, and property of and for the people of the state of Jefferson. With this state constitution, it is our humble prayer to Almighty God to purchase liberty for our posterity. The time has come for 51.